teach their course, but I don't know if they know what an adjunct is or what the word adjunct means as an actual condition of labor, or a thing that we're subjected to.
The adjuncts really were like our intimate professors who taught us the specifics of the broader topics. They were like our hands-on professors. They taught us how to edit on Final Cut and things like that. And also they overall gave us our grade for the class. So I would say I feel like the adjuncts the adjunct I had for 160 was my real professor.
He is extremely knowledgeable, extremely engaging. Definitely, if I were to guess, he's probably the teacher or the professor or the instructor that I've had my entire college career that I would say most certainly was a professor. So it's very surprising to me that he's an adjunct.
I actually talk to her to some extent, as opposed to my general professor he's teaching a class of 200 students, and I can raise my hand and he'll answer me, but it's not the same level of individual attention or connection.
In general, for the media studies program, there's somewhere, I think, in the realm of 600 majors, and there are there's about 22 full-time faculty, but that's split between film and media studies. So I consider the adjuncts to be the lifeline of this department, and I think that's increasingly true across higher education, that it's adjuncts that are sustaining the colleges and universities in this country.
Adjuncts at my level, running sections, we teach our classes, but we also do all of the grading, which can be quite a lot of work. When you have 80 students writing papers and taking a midterm and a final and doing creative projects and quizzes, that adds up to many hours of grading per student per semester. When you do the math, we are paid very poorly hourly. If you figure that each student does 3 to 4 exams and projects a semester, and you grade each one for an average of, say, 15 minutes. Sometimes it's quite a bit more if it's a longer paper, sometimes it's less if it's a quiz. I'd say at least an hour per student per semester. So if you teach 40 or 50 students, because like I do for when you teach 2 sections, I would say that would be about 50 hours per semester. That's a number I came up with. I also want to say that teachers like me who run sections of a lecture, we're paid for one course when we teach 2 sections.
So I think that adjuncts are extremely pressed for time, and that's, I think that can be reflected in how much attention they're able to provide to students, how much work they're willing to put in above and beyond what's required of the classroom. And I think that's really what makes a great professor. So I see that the difference between an adjunct professor and a full-time professor or associate professor is that there's simply a greater wealth of resources available to the full-time professors, both in time and in money and in institutional support.
Schools and institutions don't have resources to employ full-time faculty members, so they hire adjuncts, which are essentially contract labor, to come in and sort of fill that gap. And then since they're not on salary, they don't have to receive benefits and all these things, and then it becomes this army of adjuncts that are, because of this health insurance issue, for example, among other things, they're shopping around they have 3 gigs at once. They're teaching at the New School, they're teaching at Sarah Lawrence, and they're teaching at Hunter, and they're not, none of this is accumulating into benefits because they're at 3 different institutions, but they're just they have to make ends meet, so they're sort of spreading themselves out.
I think I counted once, it was 11 schools over the course of my childhood, which was awful. It was really bad for him because it meant his commutes were often really crazy, driving for hours, or he'd be working in 2 different schools at the same time and he'd have to go from one to another. And it was hard on our family too. It was really stressful not to know where he was working or where he would be working in just a few months. And there were a lot of, it was like a very tenuous thing.
I think it's really just like, it's like a pyramid and the bottom's too fat. You know what I mean? Like, there are just tens of thousands of adjuncts who are adjuncts by necessity and wish that they could get that good job at the top of the pyramid, but they're just competing with an insane number of people.
It's really unsustainable because the money is so poor compared to other jobs that someone could take, especially once you're finished with your master's degree, that it really does feel like, okay, try this out, learn, get experience, and then go somewhere else where you could get a full-time job if you want to teach.
People that are doing this while they're not in school are being paid the same amount as me. Even some of the teachers that I'm taking classes with are adjuncts, and they have their advanced graduate degrees and they're being paid the same amount. And I can't imagine that would be a comfortable situation.
The pay is so insulting and so precarious that it's just, it's just not viable. You have to teach so many classes to be able to live anything but, poverty level existence.
I think it's up to all faculty, full-time and adjunct, to gather in force and fight this sort of, I'm not going to call it slave labor, but servitude. It's definitely servitude.